A lot of people don't understand what cryptocurrency is. They think maybe this thing that you take $1 and you put it in the CD drive and it's cryptocurrency all of a sudden.
But I think the metaverse is something that we're like trying to get to.
And that we can jump past these barriers that Web2 put up because there are no gatekeepers here yet.
There's only been one time in my life where my palms and my head started sweating and I'm not exercising. And that was when I first started into crypto. I started buying some Bitcoin, started buying some Ethereum, and I saw my balance in front of me while I was buying these cryptocurrencies go up. And it made me think, like, this is hype, this is speculation, and this is fun. Like, I love it. I love seeing my money go up, the value of it, and also seeing new tech get made. And that was really how I found cryptocurrency. How did you find it?
So I had just recently completed an internship that was specifically designed for getting people into tech. And I was like, well, could we use blockchain technology to make this app better? I mean, I was always thinking about that. So my entry point was actually thinking about the utility of blockchain technology within creating apps. And I couldn't put it down. And then Beeple's hit, I was like, that's when I was like, wait a minute. I've always been artistic, and that was my in. I was like, okay, I got it. I'm an artist, and this is how I'm gonna get in. So my entry point, I knew immediately I was gonna be a creator in this space. And I was gonna be a collector, but creating NFTs, creating community. So I'm curious, like, how about you, Cole? What's been your way?
Oh gosh, my start in cryptocurrency was regretting not buying Bitcoin a long time ago. I was a deep internet kid, and I was always sort of on my radar, but it was never anything that I really jumped into until probably just 2 or 3 years ago. And I bought my first cryptocurrency ever on Coinbase probably 2 years ago or so, and was really interested in it and just kind of took off from there. And it really got deeper when I got involved in NFTs and started checking out what was happening there, seeing how much volume and traction was taking place in what I thought at first was just some insane money laundering scheme, right? That people were making so much money off of just these JPEGs online. I didn't understand what was actually being built in the background on this technology. And so that's really what got me hooked, was the prospect of, you know, going to the moon and making a lot of money. And what kept me was the community and the technology and how it could be used.
Web3, NFTs, the Metaverse, we got in it together. So how would you describe that story?
Ridiculousness is how I would describe it. I mean, really, it was just like, hey, Chris, we're getting into this Web3 game. I'm like, what are you talking about? Within 24 hours, we had a podcast focused on learning all about Web3, NFTs. You were on there, right? You were very early on in our learning of this entire world. It's been a complete roller coaster, but a lot of people don't feel like we feel when it comes to the Web3 technology. Where do you think the knowledge gap is for most people?
Well, that's a great question. I think that the knowledge gap can be that there's, at this point in the game of Web3, there's so much information that's out there on different platforms. There can be some confusion as to what all of this means. You know, I think a lot of people think about, we know what the value of $1, people know the value of euro, we know the value of these fiat currencies, but what is the intrinsic value of cryptocurrency? Like, what is the intrinsic value of an NFT? What is a non-fungible token? Right. And what is this thing called tokenomics? And what's happening is that the NFT and Web3 world is taking off in a bubble onto itself. As we look at that bubble, and we, meaning just the average person, tries to analyze a bubble that's going higher and higher and higher, and there's not a context for from where we are now and how do we get there. And so you have people who are there in Web3 building and creating. There's this feeling and this fear of wanting to go there because now the gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think that the challenge that people are finding is, what is the entry point to all of this? What are your thoughts about it?
I think that the entry point is a really interesting topic because it can be higher than most people expect, and they miss a lot of context. And the entry point that maybe they're most familiar with is not a good representation of what is actually the norm. I think a lot of people today, when they think of Web3, are talking about things like Bored Ape Yacht Club with an entry point that is 6 figures. And this is what people have sort of gravitated towards, even though it is an outlier. And even though, despite it sort of sending off alarms in their minds of how could this image of this ape be worth so many dollars, that there's actually a lot of really good that's happening beneath that. And in fact, a lot of these animal projects like this are helping build out an infrastructure and an ecosystem that is really important and valuable long term, even if that's not necessarily representative of it.
So when you think about NFTs, there's something that you have to have. You have to have cryptocurrency or regular cash to buy an NFT. And I think a lot of people don't understand what cryptocurrency is. They think it's just maybe this thing that you take $1 and you put it in the CD drive and it's cryptocurrency all of a sudden. But I feel like it's so much more, but we also don't really understand it. In my mind, cryptocurrency is if you put an operating system on top of your money, and then it had a certain set of rules and standards and processes that it followed, and then that's how you transact in the world. That's what cryptocurrency is in my mind. How would you all look at cryptocurrency and even describe that to someone else?
I think you're exactly right, where in the real world, there's an arbiter of these rules around all of our currencies, right? If it's the US dollar, it's ultimately the Fed that gets to decide how much is there in circulation, what do interest rates against it look like? And in crypto, there's no single authority that gets to make those decisions. And that's, the importance of what everyone talks about, decentralization. There's no central authority of how these things work and operate. It's community owned and governed. To get away from that authority and to really sort of, without sounding a little cliche, sort of bring the power back to the people, right?
I thought that NFTs, in my eyes, were one of the first use cases outside of just transferring cryptocurrency from one person to another. It was almost like everything I do in my life today is already digital. I buy music digitally, I watch videos digitally, and when I create content, it's also digital. So I think it's really cool that we have this use case through NFTs where we can, produce art, we can produce music, and then sell it. And then if someone else takes that same piece of music that you created, you can build things into a smart contract and say, if you sell this piece of music again, then I would like 5% because I'm the creator, I want royalties. And it's almost like you're giving the artist that power back. But I would almost imagine that with great power comes great responsibility, because what happens if you lose that asset? Like someone buys that asset and they lost their wallet. Like where does that go?
It goes into the ether. Sometimes it's just gone. I mean, you hear these like horror stories of people like, oh, I had 10,000 Bitcoin, and then they're at the dump that they think that it might have went to, and they're trying to like track their money down. But I mean, I think that part of it is kind of scary that you can lose a lot of that stuff. I mean, one of the bad things that people tend to bring up is fraud, especially in the NFT space. There's a lot of fraud or rugging. Rugging is when you have a project that it has a lot of hype and there's a lot of people excited. There's a lot of Twitter followers and it sells really quickly. And then all of a sudden the project owners, they're gone. They take sometimes millions of dollars from people and they're just gone. And you hear about folks derugging. So people coming in to take a project and they like rebuild it. We did a poll on LinkedIn to say, hey, is Web3, this includes cryptocurrency, this includes NFTs and the like, the Metaverse. Is it the future? Is it a fad, something that's just going to be here for a little bit? Or is it a fraud? It was about a halfway split between whether it was a fraud and whether it was a fad. And then some people thought it was the future. Why do you think people think that NFTs or Web3 or crypto in general is a fraud?
I think it's just a misunderstanding of the actual application and use cases for it. So even when we talk about things like like a rug. There are people now who are getting caught for those activities, and it's because all of these activities are traceable on the blockchain, right? There's a permanent ledger that exists that cannot be altered of all of these transactions that take place. So what used to be something that was done in the cover of darkness, right? Because when we look at really the history of even like Bitcoin, early on, what was it used for? Primarily illicit activities online. And now we see it as a staple in many large institutions' portfolio, right? They see the value in it, they understand the importance of it. So I think it's really just a misunderstanding of the technology and the implications of it. And I think that over time, as people are using that technology to build new things that can interact with the average person, that you can actually use in real life, when we talk about NFTs being a utility for cryptocurrency, as more of these utilities are born out, I think that some of those misunderstandings will get dispelled.
And also, like, I mean, there's different layers of fraud in this community. Let's be real. So there's the layer of people literally trying to send you weird links, and you're like, connect your wallet, or like someone's like in this Discord space, which is like a space where a lot of projects gather their community on this platform called Discord. And you're in the Discord, and someone's like, hey, I'm a project lead. Are you having an issue? Let me help you. Give me your seed phrase, which is the key to your crypto wallet. So there's different forms. And people are getting really clever with all of this fraud. Fraud has always been there. Charlatans have always been there. And I think the fraud that I think when I see these polls like this, I think the fraud that we're hearing in the whispers is, but this isn't real money. So there's so many layers because it is inextricably connected to your finances. You know, like when we think NFTs, we think it's art, but it's a digital asset. And the government hasn't defined a lot around what's happening in this space. So with that, some people are waiting for the government to define some things before they're deciding to jump in. I think this is just the cycle of what it means to be human in technology. We freak out and we have moments, and it's valid. I'm not saying that people aren't getting hurt out there. There are people that are putting their life savings into all of this. And I think this is a really great conversation to think about as you enter into this Web3 space and you're like, okay, I am ready to get into NFTs. I want to collect them. I'm ready to buy some cryptocurrency. You have to think about the same way you would when you're investing in stocks, when you're investing in CDs or bonds. What is your imprint around how you invest in those spaces? Because that would be a great jump off point. If you are a conservative investor, then conservatively invest in this space. You like high risk, you have a tolerance for high risk, then there's spaces for you there. I think people are perceiving in Web3 that it's high risk only, when there are a lot of safe ways that you can come into this community and just dip your toe in and see what the temperature is like.
One of the things that I remember when we talked a long time ago, it had to have been almost a year ago, is you say, imagine you're at a train station and there are some trains that are moving really fast, but there are also trains that are like stopped or really slow that you can step on and sort of like acclimate to something new. And I think that was such a perfect analogy for how someone could come in to a space that really is confusing for a lot of folks. But when I think about things like crypto and I think about NFTs, I think about newness. There's a newness to it. Everybody's like, oh, I'm on the alpha, right? That's one of the terms that people are talking about. But there's also this thing that I love that it's a part of the community now, is do your own research.
Always.
You know, one of the caveats that we say is like, hey, this is not financial advice. You know, do your own research, like figure things out. What are some of the best ways for people to do their own research on crypto or NFTs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any legitimate project is going to have a lot of the same information that's available as any traditional business, right? You're going to have a website. They're going to have social media presence of some sort. They're going to have teams with backgrounds that are accessible that you can look up. I think first doing the due diligence on those is the immediate step you can take, and that's really accessible. Right now, some of the terminology and things that you might find in some of those spaces might require some more research to really figure out if you're new. But you can get a really good feel for a project based on who's running it, based on how professional their presence is in some of these more traditional areas are. And I think after that, one really unique benefit about this is you can connect directly with people who are already in that community. Right. If you're interested in investing in a project, there are people who already have a personal insight into what is this team like? What is this community like? How has the project been growing and iterating over time? Are they truly sticking to the roadmap that they've presented you or not? And it's much more difficult to find that in traditional investing. And on top of that, you can also ordinarily get a pretty direct line with the team themselves. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have ever invested in Facebook and gotten a line to Mark Zuckerberg. I have not.
No, it hasn't happened yet.
But in this world, that's actually possible. You can connect to these individual Mark Zuckerbergs for their projects and kind of suss them out on your own. And it is a really unique benefit that I don't think exists anywhere else.
Right.
And not, just to put that out there, not everybody looks like Mark Zuckerberg in this space. So wanting to claim that. And what I would say is that it's very important to recognize that as far as like the accessibility, that again, there's groups on Facebook, like as far as like how do people like plug in, do your own research, there's communities that you can connect with. You can start like in earlier when you were sharing just now how you told each other we're getting into this. You can connect with your buddies, like just everyday people in your community, and you can form a group. Let's investigate this. All right, and so you have people that you already know in real life, and you're going to investigate a project, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go look at this part of the project. I'm going to go check out their Discord, and it breaks it into baby pieces, because again, some people might be looking again at Web3 all the way up there, and what kind of brings it down to planet Earth, right? Because people are trying to go to the moon, which is a terminology, right? All to the moon. But it's like to bring it from the moon back to planet Earth. Okay, I know these humans. I trust these humans. Okay, humans, friends, let's research this project together. Let's take it apart. Let's make it bite-sized pieces that are digestible. And let's do that again and again. And what you're going to do is, this is the first thing that happens to everyone who gets into Web3. They're like, what is this? Like your mind melts just a little bit.
That's what happens. And that's exactly what happened with me and Chris. I was like, hey, we got to do it. We made a decision together that we were just going to jump into this space feet first. But as I've decided to try to get my family on board, they are like, I don't have the interest to do my own research. What I've seen is people say, check out the website, check out the Discord, but that's not really a representation of value, because other people are gonna buy an NFT or trade a cryptocurrency, and that's gonna dictate the value. So how do you really do research and understand value outside of just looking at a website and saying, yes, that's there, Discord, that's there?
I think it's a little bit of what Cole was talking about with the community. That was the most surprising thing. I didn't realize how big the communities were. I just thought Discords were places where people could go and talk crap and all this stuff. But generally, like if you look at Kingdom of Dwarves, I thought the art was cool, and that's all good and gravy. But it wasn't until I got into the Discord and talking to the people, and they honestly became like friends. Or, say, hey, everybody, I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks. Like, there aren't a lot of people that I say, hey, just to let you know, I'm going to be out for a couple weeks. But I do in that particular environment, because people help each other. People have been defrauded in projects, or they've lost access to their wallets, and they're like, hey, what can I do to help? They hop in, try to figure things out. People do a lot of things for free just because they believe in the team. It's almost like you're investing with your time in these certain projects. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. Do any of you have a story that like sticks out in your mind as to like, wow, the community is really where it's at when it comes to these projects?
Yeah, I think so. So in my project, Yaku Corp, we have a really solid community of people who have come together from all over the place. And we actually have some who have already been meeting up in real life and hanging out. For some reason, out of the blue, a lemon became a weird symbol for our group, just as a completely organic, random response to some announcements. Yeah, literally the fruit, the lemon, has nothing actually to do with what we're working on. It was one guy started responding to every single announcement with a lemon emoji, and it just took off. And one day we had like thousands of lemon emoji reactions in a single day. And it's turned into this weird symbol where we've got a guy in our group who's a professional photographer and a mountaineer who's been taking a lemon with Yaku emblazoned on it up on all of these summits with him to just show his membership in the community. And it's one of those small things that is so cool and unique that I don't think any of us would have experienced outside of this world. It's such a cool and really interesting experience. I'm sure you have had a ton of experience with this.
I mean, something that comes to mind, like I'm a sucker for projects that bring me into the real world. because I really do want this to take off. And I believe Web3, by leveraging it, we can actually utilize this technology for social good and solve some real issues. So I was a part of this project, and a huge part of the roadmap that they were able to complete right early on from day one of Mint was that a considerable portion of the project was going to be used to start a school locally, a all-girls school in Nigeria, in his hometown. And so the next day after we all minted and got our droids, all of the girls at the school were on the call thanking us. We raised $300,000 for their school so that they have the longevity to have a place to be able to go, which we know is like the education of girls across the globe is a huge issue, and being able to have the ability for an NFT project, something that I'm invested in, directly connect with social impact in such a big way, and the impact that that had all the way across the world. That's when it clicked in my mind. This could actually be a space in which we can engage with people, and we can invest our money, and I can be a part of a community that I'm proud of. I mean, my investment philosophy is that I'm here to invest in projects that are going to create tangible, actionable changes in the world. And I bet on that, because I believe that this technology is about the decentralization of power, because I think people are waiting to figure out what Web3 is. And the thing is that we are creating what Web3 is. So join us. I had many hats. I had many lives before this, as many of us did. And the hat that I wore most was in the social sector. I worked in nonprofits for about 10 years. I lived in this neighborhood called Bayview Hunters Point. You know, I went there at a time too where I actually physically saw the takeoff of the startup community, like at its inception, while I was in college, while I was working in Bayview Hunters Point. And what was so striking about all of it was the extreme poverty that I saw in some of these neighborhoods. And I was a cyclist, so I'd ride around on my bike, and I could see that visibly. And I was on the front lines working with disenfranchised communities all the time. And I recognized that we have Silicon Valley coming up behind us, creating all these startups, and the folks that are in these startups not reflecting the communities of which they're surrounded by. And it took me a while until I realized that I could be in tech, I could be in the community, connecting with how to bring community along in as an educator of sorts and as an evangelist. And so my early whisperings was, I knew about Bitcoin. I was kind of skeptical about it because no one that looked like me talked to me about it. And I think had I had someone who looked like me talk to me about Bitcoin, I might have gotten into it like when it was $1, and I'd be like, probably wouldn't be in this room. Probably somewhere else, on my 50th yacht. Okay.
We will be there with you. Right?
You'd be there with me. No, of course. But I mean, all this is to say, I believe I had to have that in my life. Now that I am in Web3 and the journey that I personally took in trying to break through the barrier of tech as a Black woman in Web2, I know that that's in my bones. And that's really what brings me into this space as an evangelist for this work, as an artist, as a creator, as a product manager, as a founder of Deeper Tones Collective. There's a tissue I can connect with. It's not about zeros and ones. It's about the human connection. I mean, you said earlier, I'm not going to learn this from YouTube, but I will, drop in with Adorable about this. I will check in with Chris about this, because this technology is only as amazing as the people that are connected to it. And I think for me, seeing what happened in Silicon Valley in Bayview Hunters Point, I said to myself, not again. And I'm betting on the fact that we, as disenfranchised peoples that are entering into the space, are valuable, and that we have something to give if given the chance, if given the education, and that we can jump past these barriers that Web 2 put up, because there are no gatekeepers here yet.
One thing that we have talked about quite a bit is this idea of wealth distribution and socioeconomic impact, because there is a lot of money in this field. Some of it's fast money, but some of it is purposeful money. What has been your experience, and where do you hope we kind of go with the technology?
Well, I mean, let's look at numbers. Just last year alone, people spent $24.5 billion in the NFT ecosystem. Billion. And that was just in 1 year. And so there is a lot of money circulating within this space. And I mean, in the earlier call, you said, yeah, community, I got in it for money. I'm not saying like money's always going to be there. And I'm here to create money for myself while also doing good for others. I think what is compelling about Web3 is that the value comes from us. No one's dictating the value but the community. Wealth distribution is something that is at the basis of what I believe Web3 can provide, but crypto literacy is right underneath that, lifting up the foundation of getting people to the next level. You know, this is the fourth industrial revolution that people have been talking about. I believe so. You just have to be willing, again, to allow yourself to think about how you can generate and build wealth for yourself in this space. And you don't have to do it overnight. And I think that's the challenge I think a lot of people are faced with when you are in a place where you don't have your needs met, is wanting to get into building wealth for yourself and for your family. Because for me, that's the space where we're ushering in and we're bringing people forward and we're creating the validation of this space and we're creating the opportunity for there to be economic advancement. But without the education, there is no wealth building here. It is just pure speculation and it's just pure like, well, I'll see what's gonna happen.
Well, I think the upside is so intertwined in those two things when we talk about education and we talk about access to wealth distribution. The education portion will teach people about the good of decentralization for ownership, and that will lead them to understanding the decentralization of access, right? Because right now when these institutions are controlled by single large entities, they also control the access, right? If I want to go to Wells Fargo and get a loan, I've got to go through Wells Fargo to get a loan, and they're going to dictate my terms to me. They're going to dictate how much I can have. Sometimes it's based on things that are outside of my control. These things don't necessarily add up to the average person, and I think those are the areas where if we can increase education, we can increase the adoption. The trouble is we are so new to the space, the education that's available is not honestly that great. We're talking about, you can't watch a YouTube video. No one's gonna go to YouTube and teach you about DeFi, right? It's just not possible. So the easiest thing is what YouTube chose to do, and what I think we've all really done, is just jump in.
When I first got started, I gotta say, like, it almost felt like the internet was being reborn. Like, you needed all these special tools just to get started. I used to not even use Coinbase. I was like, I'm not gonna put all of my eggs into this basket. I'm gonna choose something that is overseas. I used to use overseas exchange when I first got started. And at that point, it was all about, you know, the ICOs, the initial coin offerings. And that was almost like the NFT, where you would jump into these new coins, buy some coins, and then maybe it would blow up, skyrocket, and then you would sell it or just hold it. And it seems like it's almost the same with NFTs. They have some utility, like building schools, access to a community, but is that the future? Is a NFT the future, or is it something else?
I think it's both. I mean, I think in some regard, these things we're talking about could definitely be done in Web 2, right? Like, there's nothing preventing me from joining my local YMCA and joining a community of some sort.
Right.
The difference is the access to a diverse group of people who have a shared cause, as well as this sort of shared identity, right? These NFTs provide to you that extra level of identity. And of course, they do also add another like sort of psychological benefit. There's a lot of information out there that they sort of scratch that same part of our brain as like owning a luxury item, right?
Yes.
So there's this sense of community, this sense of ownership, but also the opportunity to do that with people that you would not ordinarily ever be exposed to. My mom grew up in a town of 400 people in rural Missouri. She can vividly remember a friend's birthday where they were given a television and said television was thrown into a crick, as she would put it, because they were not about the technology. So that technology adoption takes time. Meeting people outside of your immediate, interactions is difficult. And this world of Web3 has made those things significantly easier, both to sort of leverage the technology that we have out there, as well as meet people who have those shared interests with us in these communities and build a shared identity. So my background is primarily in digital marketing, actually. I went to a small school in Missouri and just felt like I was always a driven individual, and I had a small PR marketing firm I sort of ran while I was in college on the side, and it landed me in my first full-time job when I graduated. I had a client that was very happy with my work, luckily, and when I was there, I sort of took my casual love of the internet from home and my time playing video games and doing things like that to really expanding that into the business side of things, understanding how does Facebook Ads Manager work, how does Google Analytics work, and I really liked how this sort of data spoke to the social side of this cool thing I had grown up with. And I think that that's really sort of what drove me to where I am now, because I think Web3 is a good mix of that, right? This mix of this data and information, but also this social side of interacting with one another. And so I went from digital marketing full-time to now I work as the marketing lead for a Metaverse project on the Solana blockchain, Yaku Corp. And it's been a great transition. It's been awesome to make connections with other people who are running projects, who are creating these unique experiences for people that are so important, and leveraging what is really a whole new opportunity for a new generation of people to experience, financial freedom, to experience freedom for their intellectual property. And so I'm very excited to be involved in the world of Web3. I haven't been in it for a long time. I really dove headfirst into NFTs. It's been only about less than a year ago now. But this space moves so fast and we're so early that it feels like it's been a lifetime.
Complexity is everywhere. Instead of avoiding challenges or fearing failure, I've learned that you have to focus on what you can control. In work and in life, when that noise and chaos try to creep in, I choose to stay true to myself and remember who I love. That's how I control complexity.
One of the biggest driving forces for all of this stuff is this concept of FOMO, the fear of missing out. Yeah, I can't begin to tell you how many times people, I wish I would have invested in Google, or going back even further, I wish I would have invested in the railroad, right? There's always these big economic booms that people just miss. And I think a lot of folks that are in the space right now, they're like, I don't want to miss out. So I'm in there to win it. But when we think about the future of the technology, like we were talking about before, we think this is a very nascent stage, right? These are the caveman drawings on the wall. But I think the future is something that we can't even imagine just yet. There's so many different things that are part of this world that we haven't found what those actual applications are going to be. What do you all think from a future perspective where we're headed?
I believe that it's always, no matter what, going to be people-driven, because people are making these projects. We're leveraging this technology to create value, to create ownership. And as more people kind of come online to the fact that they can be owners in this space, like when you kind of, your sweaty palms, but you're like, I want a piece of this, because I think on some level, Ron, you were like, I want a sense about this place of liberation. This goes beyond just finance. And I think that's what's so attractive about it. In the traditional system of finance, we all know what that feels like.
One of my favorite books of all time is Ready Player One, because it brought back a bunch of nostalgia about playing video games. But the biggest concept within this book is this metaverse, this different life that people could plug into, this virtual reality headset. In this world, everyone was pretty much on the poverty line. They had to live in these things called stacks. But this main character, he could go into this world and be whoever he wanted to be. And he ended up being really good in this game, and he would play these games and get these items and all this different stuff, which I think is incredible. And I think that's where we're trying to head in the metaverse. We just heard Facebook change its name to Meta, right? Trying to get on that train. Like, the metaverse is something that I don't think is quite here. There's definitely flavors of it. We have a friend, Artsy. She does incredible environments in the metaverse. But I think the metaverse is something that we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to this place where we can have a secondary life in this world and make it feel real. What are your thoughts on the metaverse?
Well, I do think that we've already had whispers of the metaverse and that we've experienced it. Like, if you have a Facebook profile, if you have an Instagram profile, if you're on Twitter or Clubhouse, these different spaces, if you're in a Discord, there's a way in which you are connecting with people cross distance, and you're building relationship. I mean, one of the main definitions of the metaverse, as I know it in Web3, is that it's connected to the blockchain. So there's also this other concept of like, actually, technically, wait, time out. What is the metaverse technically? Because we've had these things, if not, then what's the difference between the metaverse and a video game? Because that some people kind of bring that back to me. They're like, adorable, like, how is this not just a video game simulation? The blockchain technology is the underlying technology of which we've already talked about NFTs, we've talked about crypto, and now when we think about the metaverse, it is yet another form, it's another product that is built upon that technology, that's powered by that technology. So when you're thinking about an authentic metaverse, we're thinking about places that are decentralized in their nature, of which you could have an avatar body, of which you could purchase wearables or purchase different attributes that would allow those attributes to show up in the metaverse, and that you can have these different social exchanges, financial exchanges. There's these things that call themselves metaverses, but they're actually guarded and gate-kept virtual experiences. But the definition of the metaverse is that it's unbounded, again, by some sort of hierarchical form of a company. It's something that we all own a piece of, because we all have connection, we all have the ability to buy into that technology on an equal playing field. And so I think the definition is something that we have to unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are a ways off from anything that resembles a true metaverse by that definition. We are a long ways away. But the groundwork at least is sort of taking place for what does this look and feel like. And I guess to me the metaverse is taking our favorite parts of real world activities and social interactions and sort of making them tie into this fantastical experience that we want to have, right? I think the importance of these sort of digital social atmospheres has only been made so much more important on the heels of what we've experienced the last couple of years with COVID. There was so much social distancing, both literally and figuratively, between one another, that we missed out on a lot of opportunities to be with physically, mentally, and emotionally the people in our lives we'd like to be. Being able to congregate digitally in this sort of way, I think is really powerful. And I think that's personally what excites me the most. Imagine a world where, your brother's maybe stationed overseas for the military, but on Sundays you could still go watch that new episode of Attack on Titan together, right? These are those sorts of small interactions that I think really get overlooked when we start thinking about these Ready Player One sort of experiences that of course we all want, but I think the baseline is in these much more tangible experiences that are going to be here maybe sooner than some of us expect.
When you hear that word metaverse, you can't think of the word metaverse without hearing the word universe. It almost sounds similar, and the universe is galaxies composed into one universe. I think it's the same for the metaverse. Like, we have multiple cryptocurrencies, multiple NFT projects, and the metaverse would be this fabric that connects it all together. For me, I started my career in computer networking. And with computer networking, everything is connected, but not everything knows about each other. My computer doesn't know the address of your computer, so it sends it to something called a default gateway. It sends it to the person that might know, and then that person sends it to someone else they might know. I can imagine the metaverse being similar to that, to where you can have this ecosystem that you operate in, and if you're operating in someone else's ecosystem, it doesn't matter like the language that you're speaking, because everybody has the ability to speak this Web3 language.
And there's the technology, but then again, it all comes back to the community. And the metaverse is only going to be as powerful as the people who get behind it. We're literally creating the culture around it. We're creating the social norms, the financial structures around the metaverse. The metaverse also offers us the opportunity of, yes, this kind of futuristic lens, but it can also be a space in which we can reflect on opportunities of maybe histories that we want to keep. Since the blockchain is immutable and lives on forever, that there's this element of legacy that we could see in the metaverse. I myself am like a part of a newly evolving group of people who are creating this thing called the Black History DAO. And we're eventually wanting to create a Black History metaverse where we can think about the histories of the people of the African diaspora around the globe, not just in the US. And I too am also inspired by books. Like one of the books that I'm reading right now, I actually have with me And it's this book that's about Black fortunes. And it's this book that's centered around the first Black millionaires that came out of slavery. Within the same lifetime were able to become millionaires. And this inspires me because these are sometimes stories like this are untold stories. But I mean, they're stories that if I were to put on a VR headset and interact with Black history, the level of value and worth that would bring to me and my community would further kind of bring me closer, and I think bring a lot of disenfranchised people closer into recognizing that they're reflected in this environment.
Let's talk about what is here today, the metaverse. What is in front of us? What can we touch? What are the opportunities? Because I think, that's where we're at. The future sounds so bright for the metaverse and Web3, but I think we often forget about where we're at and how are we going to use that information today. And from my perspective, the metaverse is it's almost in this game state where everything that's being created feels like a video game. But there's that opportunity to earn, there's that opportunity to create a community and jump into a community. And there's also the opportunity to just be out of your normal day-to-day. But I think, everybody has their own lens. Like, what is your lens as a metaverse creator?
So I think for me, I look at it backwards, meaning from future to now. And so then I think, how do we take what we have today and progress it to what is the ideal? And the ideal is exactly what we've talked about, right? This awesome Ready Player One experience where you can do and be anything with your immediate friends, with people from halfway across the globe. But it's going to take a long time to get there, and there's a bunch of reasons. The ways that people are building right now, they're building on different code bases that don't interact with one another appropriately. They're building on different platforms. Some people are building experiences based in your web browser. Other people are building things that require you to download an app. But I think over time, we will find what that common communication method is between even multiple chains, multiple different software solutions for people to be building on. And right now, to get there, I think what is taking place and what is sort of touchable and something you can interact with is more reminiscent to a sort of video game environment, but that's setting up the building blocks for what is to come, But the important thing is these very basic systems are setting up what is going to create long-term success. So, right now you've got options to go out and socialize with people. You can, to some degree, build an environment and experience within that setting, but it's going to take, I think, several years until we see this interconnectedness for multiple worlds to make access to the experiences like what you're trying to build for everyone. I think it's going to take a while to get them all connected, but it will happen.
One of the things that I'm super excited about is NFT worlds, right? You can experience very basic metaverse-like things. Kingdom of Dwarves, they have their own NFT world, theatrical, like there's taverns and mountains and all these really cool things. And we did like a scavenger hunt in there. We brought everybody into the world. We're looking for all these clues. And that's really just a nod to what's going to happen in the future. We're going to have these like ultra realistic things on Unreal Engine and be able to really experience this world almost like just like this. But when we think about Web3, we have to first talk about Web 1 and Web 2. Like, why is there a need for Web 3? Web 1, static, right? Web 2 is more permission-based, right? You can have access to this because I'm the entity, but how do you differentiate between Web 2 and Web 3?
Yeah, I think Web 3 is getting back to the roots of Web 1 as far as how people approach it. Web 1 was very permissionless, sort of, a whole new experience, a new world that didn't have a big infrastructure built out around it. And what Web 2 became was certain players owning the infrastructure that was built. Mm-hmm. So Web 3 is saying, hey, this infrastructure is there, and we want to get back to sort of this open source Web 1 feeling, but in that updated infrastructure Web 2 methodology. And it's taking that ownership and dispensing it out to the average person rather than a handful of really big entities in the space.
Because we've had more exposure to Web 1 and Web 2, we have millennials, we have Zs, we have X. Like, a lot of these different generations just have an understanding of technology and literacy that we didn't have prior to the invention of these different web technologies. So we're at a very big tipping point where we have like a mass entry point that we didn't have in Web 1. I think there's some echoes of like, what is Web 3 and is it real and is it viable and is it going to be around? These are the same questions. That's when people ask me about that. Like, these are exactly the same questions we were asking about Web 1. And I mean, here we are, we went to Web 2 and now we're at Web 3. There's gonna be a Web 4 and 5 and 6 probably based on history. Like if we just kind of look back at history of how we've interacted with technology, it's always something that's always consistent is that it's iterated upon. What we're seeing is that the sky is really the limit as far as what's possible, but what we do need that's very clear is we need more people to come in or put their ear to the ground and kind of really listen in to what we're doing here. That's something that Web3 is always going to consistently be open and welcoming in, is more people to co-create, because this is the most co-creative moment that we've ever seen in technology since Web 1.
And I think that co-creation is only spurred on, specifically even more so than we can probably ideate right now, by the metaverse, right? Being able to get that collaborative experience that's more tangible through that online environment, I think is a huge deal. I mean, think about when you're working from home in this last year, right? We've all kind of been cast aside to our home offices and jumping in Microsoft Teams. It just doesn't quite feel the same, right? And so I think that these sort of metaverse experiences can take the good from that work from home, being able to still be connected despite these barriers between one another, and add on to it more of our own personality and who we are, and maybe even provide us an opportunity to become what we would like to be more so, right?
I'm not trying to be the wet blanket here, but I do tend to think about my daughters, right? I have 3 daughters, and I think about the way technology has sort of taken some folks out of reality. And so I do like the idea of a metaverse, to be able to go in there and be whatever you want to be. You could be a billionaire, you could fly across the sky like Superman if you wanted to. But my fear would be that it would be so much better than real life, to be accepted so much more than real life, that becomes your life. And then you no longer live in the now. You don't go outside anymore. You don't have coffee with friends. You're having coffee in the metaverse. How do we keep it so that people can enjoy the metaverse, but it doesn't become their reality?
The same could be said about a lot of different technologies that we already have today.
Absolutely.
People are on the gram, in real life in a cafe, you know, on the gram, and it's like, but you're in real life in a cafe. And so, I mean, Chris, to be honest, that's going to happen. That's that's just my answer.
Right.
It's going to happen. I think I always bring it back, and I feel actually, I'm grateful that I didn't initially just jump into tech. I had many years before I got here, and I'm grateful for that. And my little flag that I put in the ground is that this is all about the humans. We are the ones that are creating this technology. We are the ones that we are waiting for. And this technology is going to be a reflection of us as a humanity. You're going to find people who want to disassociate, because that's what they need, and they're going to create those spaces, and they're going to attract a certain crowd. And it can be challenging when we do have children, but one thing to note, y'all, this is their world. They are the ones, I'm playing in Web 3. These kids are coming in, and this is their world. And they're going to be the ones to take Web 3, Web 4, whatever, to the next level. We're the ones that are just kind of like the cool adults that think we know what time it is. But these kids building in sandblocks, these kids understanding these, we are the ones that are going to build up this space. That's why it's so critical and important that we have people in this conversation.
It's like the plumbing is the same. If you were to get on the metaverse or Web3 technology, NFTs, you're going to buy anything, you don't have to upgrade your computer. You just start using it. And I think it's almost like if you were to look at your shower, for instance, if you were to turn on your water, where that water is coming from, who knows? Is it coming from a central place or is it coming from a decentralized place, the river?
Yeah.
We don't know that. And I think that's the same experience that users are going to see when they join into Web3. There's no difference for how they interact, but the features that they can get are different. If you were to turn your shower water on, maybe you're going to do hot water or cold water. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. It just matters what features come out of your shower at the end of the day. And I think it's the same for Web3. And one of the things I think is really crazy is that we are building this for our children. Like you said, we're building this for them, and they are going to have more of an opportunity. When my parents taught me about stock, they had no opportunity. The door was closed for them, from financial opportunity to literacy when it comes to that. And they gave me one step closer to that opportunity of acquiring stock. And I think it's the same for us with our kids. It's a different type of asset. It just so happens to be digital, but at the end of the day, it's still an asset that they can own, acquire, and ultimately use.
I love what you're saying about assets. And when you think about assets in any sort of medium, you think about value. People see these NFTs on social media and on the media saying like, wow, millions and millions of dollars. Looking at cryptocurrency, millions and trillions of dollars in this ecosystem. But where does value come from? Because it seems like a lot of hype, and I think that's where the fraud people come from. Like, oh, it's a fraud, or maybe it's a fad. But for the folks that are looking at it for a future, like, where does value actually come from?
I think it comes from a few places. I think for starters, it can obviously come from the utility of the item, right? What is the use case for this particular coin, for this particular NFT, for this metaverse? What is it providing to me that I can use that has a tangible value impact on my life? And I do think a lot of it, in addition to that, is speculative, you know, and it's things that you can't really naturally assign a dollar value to. They are born out of the interactions that people have around it. I think probably what drives the value more than anything right now in the NFT space is truly the community and the brand that it's building. It's harder to put a tangible value behind something that is so intangible like community and brand, but that's what we've seen. That's why we have these projects like Bored Apes that are so high in value out in the market. These projects like Moonbirds that just recently launched on Ethereum, it skyrocketed in price almost overnight.
Yeah.
And there's no tangible utility or roadmap behind that, right? But it's really hard to discount the value of things like brand and community. So I think that can be really tricky for the general public to understand, but it is founded in a lot of times something that is maybe more tangible in our normal lives with the premium added on it, if that makes sense. Ron, I'd love to hear what you think.
Let's be honest. You can have your whole life change looking at Web3 and the Metaverse. You could have a positive impact and become a millionaire, sometimes even a billionaire if you were early enough on Bitcoin. You could also lose all your money. Yep. Mm-hmm. And there's almost like this fog, fad, future, or fraud. Which one is it? Start with you, Chris.
I think it's the future, honestly. I think our nascent way of using Web3 is going to change dramatically over the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years. But I think it's the future from a business perspective. I think it's a future from a technology perspective and even a social perspective. So I think it's future. Will there be some fad? Will there be some fraud? Absolutely.
I've got to agree. I think that's about the best way to put it. Like, there's going to be fraud. There has been, and there will be more. There are going to be things within it that are fads. Things that will come and go naturally. That is the same with, I think, almost any industry and area of investment, right? But I firmly am rooted in believing it's the future for a number of reasons. I think it's going to make a big impact on people's access to all sorts of services that maybe they have previously not had access to. And I think it is also going to make it so that these really, really large institutions that exist that we all interact with are going to be more owned by us and the general public rather than a handful of people that have a large monetary backing and incentive to run it and own it.
I think the future is now. I mean, we're seeing mass adoption by a lot of people. We're seeing institutions moving to digital currency, like offering digital currency, different countries that are going through different type of turmoils around their own fiat, switching to crypto as a form of helping to create opportunities for their community to have transactions. So the future is happening right in front of us. It's more so our ability to step into the future.
I did want to give a toast. You know, our parents, grandparents, they heard about telephones. It's technology. They were skeptical. Same for the internet. It's technology. We were all skeptical, but it ultimately brought us together. I think it's the same with Web3 and the Metaverse. Whether it's a fad today, it's up to us to make it the future for tomorrow. So cheers.
Ooh, cheers.